This is a video of some writing tips that a friend of mine, Bruce, who teaches technical writing here at Sam Houston State, asked me to prepare to give some tips on technical writing from a chemist's perspective. And so I've come up with my top 7 tips on writing professionally. And so let's get started with tip number 1. If it didn't get written down, it didn't happen. In chemistry, especially with the lab notebook, if you didn't record your data, then you might as well not have taken any data. But this is expanded even further in the documenting experiments in terms of written reports, or in professorship in terms of our publications. If we didn't write it and send it off to a journal, essentially it didn't happen. That information is going to perish with us. And so writing is really important to document the advancement of science. Tip number 2. Writing is targeted to the reader's understanding. And so this impacts the language that we use. It impacts the way we write. The purpose of language is to communicate. And so we want to target the style of writing. We want to target all of the data that we report. This is even why we're concerned about significant figures, because we're communicating to the reader. If I don't truncate the decimal place to the appropriate spot, I'm telling somebody that I used a very precise measurement method if I keep 5 decimal places, when maybe I only have confidence in the first decimal place. So rounding numbers is even a communication issue that feeds into writing. Tip number 3, style is important. Style speaks to the credibility of the author. If you have grammatical errors and misspellings, if you don't get capitalization right or punctuation, you're really doing a lot of harm to yourself in the eyes of the reader. And so you want to follow the style guide, and you want to report and write correctly. It also gives us information about the thoroughness of our writing. Style tips and requirements in the bibliography tell us how to thoroughly cite a source. It's not enough just to have the author, but which particular publication did you draw that information from, and when was it published, so that the reader can find that source and get more information. And finally, style is important for clarity of communication. You want to write clearly, and there are guidelines that we all agree upon that help us to communicate our ideas to someone else very clearly. This is actually a controversial point, and it's my point number 4. Passive voice is preferred in science. And I know that goes against many writing instructors. They don't like the passive voice. They like active writing and engaging writing. And that's fine for some disciplines. It's certainly preferable in novels and fiction. But in science, we want to remove the author from the data. We want the data to stand on its own. We don't want it to be constantly brought to mind in the mind of the reader that this particular author took that data. We would like to see the data presented in a dispassionate way that removes the author from the equation. Now, that's never 100% possible because we are part of our experiments, but the point of writing in a passive voice is to essentially remove the scientist from the data and let the data stand on its own. We could animate our instruments and say that the spectrometer gave the following spectrum, but again, that's turning that spectrometer into an active agent, and it really isn't an active agent. So we've really felt that science should be presented in a passive voice, and so that's why style is important in that particular instance, and it's to communicate more effectively. Number 5, this is the struggle that most students have. Writing is very difficult when you have nothing to say. And so when you're given a writing assignment, the prompt is really key. And that's why a lot of times writing instructors will have you write about yourself, because surely you have a knowledge of yourself that other people don't have. And so you have something to say. It's more difficult then when you get a writing prompt that requires you to use other sources. You can't write a paper on a source you haven't read. You can't write a paper on a topic that you haven't thought about. And so for your first task in writing is actually exploring the subject and having something to say. And that's what leads me to point number 6. Clear thinking leads to clear writing. And so if you haven't thought about your topic, if you haven't done your research, you can't think clearly about it. And if you can't think clearly about it, you can't write clearly about it. And so this is really the foundational issue of writing, is it forces you to think clearly about a topic, and then to put those clear thoughts into clear writing, using the proper style, using the proper voice, making sure you document everything so it's thorough and that it communicates well to the reader. So I think that's the key to clear thinking leads to clear writing. And then over a lifetime of practice in writing, that's point number 7, practice in writing will train you to think clearly. So that's why writing is so important. It's not just to communicate, but it also has this transformative effect on you. As a writer, you will become a better thinker. And that's what we want for our students. That's what we want for society. We want people to be able to think clearly about topics that are confusing and difficult. So dive into writing. It is something that you need to do, but it's also something that will transform you. Hopefully you have enjoyed this, and there'll be more to come. Thanks.